question last week about the difference between dam and patuach.
Yeah.
Essentially, they're the same thing. But so I didn't understand.
Right.
Anyway,
right.
apparently if you said this already, forgive me.
I just said what Rashi says. All I thought was Rashi. I go with what Rashi said. Rashi says that the dam is a strong argument.
Why is it stronger? It's that somebody else, I forget who it was, evidentiary.
Yeah.
That dam is actually evidence.
Right.
And petach patuach is just hard.
Right. That's exactly what Rashi said.
Right.
Rashi says it. Yeah. Okay. So today's daf is daf Yud Aleph in Ksubas, as we learned for 4 Shlema for our Lozer ben Reuma and Yosef Israel ben Chaim Michal. Says the Mishnah from the top of the page. These are a convert or a woman who was taken into captivity by the goyim, or a shifra, or a slave woman, means half Jewish, half not. Of course, the order here is out. You always have this lashon throughout Shas, even though the order really should be shenas gairu, because this guy was going on the Gyorus, and Shvuya is the one niftu, and the Shifcha Shenishachru. So, but that's the lashon of the Mishnah. It means the same thing. In other words, they got out of captivity, or they converted. If in other words, the concern is, when did people abuse these girls? Were they abused? If they were abused before the age of 3 years old, so we have a called psulim grow back. Lashon of the Gemara we'll see is that's like you put your finger in your eye and tears come out, more tears follow up. The same way the psulim, her virginity grows back. So if it was less than 3 years old, she's entitled to a regular ksubah. We learned yesterday that a psula gets $200. It's dinars. I always use lashon of dollars, but it's dinars. And Nalmani gets 100. Okay, so you know what? Even though the assumption is that if she converted or she got out of the, let's call it the goyish atmosphere by the age of 3, then she's entitled to a ksubah. She's considered a psula, even though she was once a shiksa, or she was captured, or she was a shifra. Amar Rav Huna, that's what the Mishnah says. Amar Rav Huna was like this. Famous called ger katan matbinos al das bezin. A ger katan. We're not talking about the mila, but in the time of the Gemara, in the time of Beis Midrash, you did a carbon also. But talking about the tefillah, a ger katan. This happens very often when people adopt a child, and they adopt from a goy, and they convert the child, even though the child doesn't know what's going on. The child's a baby. They convert him under the age of when they're not bar mitzvah, under the age of bar mitzvah, whatever their age was, a baby or 2 or 3 or whatever. Bezdin doesn't. In other words, Bezdin can convert them, even though they don't know anything. They don't know what it means, but they can convert them. We'll see. Because it's an advantage. It's a merit for a person to be a Jew. Mitzvahs, etc. So what's the chiddush? That it's a schus and zachlam shalom b'fanav, even though the person doesn't understand when he's not here, not in his presence. It's a schus tanina. We already learned that elsewhere throughout Shas. Zachlam shalom b'fanav and chavam shalom. You can be mazaka something for somebody. You can acquire something, or on their behalf, act on their behalf if it's definitely an advantage. But you cannot do it if it's a liability. You can't do a liability for them. So we already know, since this is an advantage to become a Jew, so of course Bezin could do it. It also goes to Riches, a famous big sugya. How can they do it? Minaraisa, he's not Jewish, and it's all Drabonan. But that's the rule that the Bezin does, and that's how we regard a kid today. If you're ever involved in a case of an adoption, they get 3 people to act as a Bezin, and on behalf of the child, they're mazaka for him, and they put him into the mikveh, etc., and give the bris meal, etc., on behalf of the child. So what's the chiddush in this? We already know Zachl and Shal Farim, the same of no, a guy would rather be promiscuous and rather be like Goyim are, and that be free. Why does he want to be Jewish? And then he's limited by the 613 mitzvahs, etc. He'd rather be without any rules at all, like a guy. So we have a call to Eved body b'efker. An Eved body he's certainly, we have that call that he's vadai. Would prefer to be free of any restraints and etc. He doesn't want the Jewish restraints. So you might think it's not an advantage to make the kid a Jew. He'd rather be a goy. Kamash Malan, the chiddush of the Mishnah. The Hani Mili Gadol. That's only when he would rather remain a goy or remain an eved, an adult. The Tom Disura. He already knows what it's like to be free and to be able to eat whatever he wants and to be able to have beer with whatever he wants. And he's only limited by the 7 mitzvahs by Noach. But even if he keeps those, but the other one's not, a cotton who doesn't know that's chuslo, it's takas chus for him to be a Jew. Lema Messiah, what does it all have to do with our Mishnah, with our Gemara? Lema Messiah, let's bring proof from our Mishnah. Hagyoris, Vashpuya, Vashivcha. If you have one of these three, they became, let's say, a full Jew, or she was Jewish, she was captured. She got out of the Goyish atmosphere under the age of 3. Under the age of 3, it's okay. My love. Now, when we talk about this Gyoris, how were you Magayer her under the age of 3? My love, isn't that what our Mishnah is talking about? A Gyoris that you were Magayer under the age of 3. Well, she doesn't know what's going on. Must be was done by a bezin. So is this a proof from our Mishnah to this case of that a bezin is Magayer a child under the age of 3 or any under the age of bar mitzvah at all? No, maybe our Mishnah is speaking about a Gyoris or a Ger, right? Who was a Ger or Gyoris who was Magayer the whole family. It happens many times, right? A Goy is Magayer, and the wife is Magayer, and his children are Magayer. He brings everybody in. In other words, we're not talking about a case of a Bezdin. It's talking about a case where our Mishnah could be talking about a case where a child is being Magayer together with his whole family. The Nechalu b'mai davaravu. It's very happy. The child's very happy. Even a 2-year-old child is happy to do what his father's doing, what his parents are doing. So therefore, our Mishnah is no proof to this case of ger kat matbil nosal das bezdin. What does that do with bezdin? It's not a bezdin doing it on behalf of the child with no parent, with no parental supervision. Maybe our Mishnah is speaking about where there was parental supervision. In other words, the whole Goyish family converted together. Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef says, listen though. Even though whatever the circumstances were, whether the parents converted with the child, by the way, we learned before in Yevamos, they're not really related anymore, right? Technically, the Goyish family, the McGillicuddies could convert the whole family, the father, the mother, the daughter, and the son. And technically, Torah, the son can then marry the daughter because they're not really related. However, we don't do it. The rabbis discourage that, but technically they could get this guy kosher. But besides that, we said over here, he says like this: whether they converted with the parents or whether Bezin converted them, Rav Yosef, but once they become adult, they can reject it and they could say, listen, when are they really makabel mitzvahs? When they're bat mitzvah. So once they got a gadol, they can reject it at their bar mitzvah. They can reject it and walk away and not be Jewish responsible. Meisvei, we have a kasha on this though. Look at the end of the mission. We already quoted this once in the Gemara, right? It's the third time we're having it today. Right? That's what our mission said. They get 200. Esau, wait, what's going on over here? What are you telling me? That this Gioris can convert under the age of 3, and then she could walk away when she's in other words, what are you saying? She converted under the age of 3. And she gets married, let's say, when she's 10 or whatever, right? Gets married when she's 10. She has a ksuba of 200 because she's considered to be a virgin, a psula. So that's what you say. So if you tell me though, when they get to be bat mitzvah, she can walk away. We're going to give her $200 that she can go eat while she can eat. She can consume, and she's entitled to take. And she's a shiksha, she's not entitled to any ksuba if she's not Jewish. How can that be? So the Gemara says, no, we only give it to her when she's a gdola. So the Gemara says, so when she's a gdola also, when she's a gdola, she can walk away. He says, no, like we say by where we have the same concept by a miyun. Remember, by miyun, she had a marriage rabbanan, when her father was no longer in the picture, she can walk away until she's bat mitzvah. Once she's bat mitzvah, she's accepted it already. The same thing here. Once she's bat mitzvah and has not rejected Judaism, she can't walk away anymore. If she had a bat mitzvah once, as soon as it was on her birthday and she was bat mitzvah, that's it. She can't reject it anymore, and then she's fully Jewish. Once she's bat mitzvah, she's that age, which is, you see that's the halacha much we've seen of bat mitzvah, even though Goyim don't have bar and bat mitzvahs. When it goes according to their seichel, if they're 10 years old and they know what they're doing, they're responsible. You would kill, if they committed a murder, let's say, a 10-year-old guy commits a murder, he knows what he's doing, yichayev misa, but a Jew is not because he's not bar mitzvah. So that's the rule. Okay, so that's what we said over here, and that's how we resolve this whole issue. We say, yes, Bezin can do it on their behalf, but when they get older, or their father If their family does, it makes no difference if they converted with their family or they converted alone. They were an orphan or a guy that was given up for adoption, and now some Jews adopted them and they took them to a bezdin. So they can convert them, and when they get older, until the age of bat mitzvah or bar mitzvah, they can walk away. Okay.
If you've got someone who's Gair after at age 14 has no time for
Correct. Not at age 14. A Yoris who's Magayer after the age of 3 has no time as Psulim. 3, correct. Yeah, because the assumption is that she's been violated already, right? That she's no longer a virgin. Okay.
So someone who marries her,
but no, he has no time of psulim, and therefore he can't time mekechtos, as we're going to see in the Gemara. He can't say, listen, mekechtos, and no, you should have known. That's we're going to see it in the next mission. Masav Rav asked a similar kasha to the kasha we asked from our mission, but he asked it from a different case. We're going to talk about this later on, third parak. The following girls, Nara and Psula, are entitled to knas. If they were raped, they get $50. The father gets 50 dinars. Habala mamzeres. A person raped a mamzeres, even though he cannot fulfill the lo sia leisha because he can't marry the mamzeres if he's a Jew. But still, if she's a Jewish girl, her parents messed up and made her into a mamzeres. But she's a Jewish girl. She's entitled to $50. Balanasina, that's their gerus was questionable with David Amel, Falkusis, Valagioris, Valshvui, Valshif. In other words, as long as these girls got out of whatever their situation was under the age of 3, all right, they're entitled to. Now, the case of Mamzeris is not; she wasn't in captivity, but she's a Mamzeris. Still entitled. She's still entitled to 50. But all these other cases, including Yoris, they're entitled as long as they got out of that situation before the age of 3, yesh lam knas. Again, so yes, and what is saying? What do you mean? She can walk away from it? You said if they were Megayah her under the age of 3, or any age really, if she was Megayah at 5 or 10, but the issue of here we're talking about in terms of knas, you're going to give her knas, she's going to take it and eat. In other words, why should you give her knas? She's not a Jewish girl. She can walk away. Says, we only give her the $50 after she's Megayah. In other words, if it was a Yoris that was raped and she was Megayah under the age of 3, so we consider it to be a psula, she was raped at the age of 5 or 8 or 10, we only give her the $50 after she has been bat mitzvah and she hasn't rejected Judaism. So the same question, can she walk away after she's bat mitzvah? No, but once she's been bat mitzvah for even a minute, it's too late. She had rejected before the bat mitzvah. Same answer we gave before. So we go through the same shakavataya, but Abaye asked it where Abaye asked the first kasha. Abaye asked the kasha from our Mishnah, and Rabbi asked the kasha from the case of knas. Abaye lomer Rabbi White and Abaye asked Rabbi zasum knasa. You asked the kasha. Wait a minute, if she can walk away, the whole issue we're saying over here, we're dealing with the second aspect, not that Bezin could be Megayah, but the fact that she can walk away later on if she can reject Judaism, but by the age of bat mitzvah. So Abaye asked the kasha from our Mishnah, how can you give her $200 as a ksuba? Why didn't he ask the kasha from the case of knas? How can you give the $50 knas? He says, because the $50 knas is that the rapist shouldn't get away with nothing. $50 was a substantial amount of money in those days, right? So you ask kasha, how can you give her a knas and she's going to become a shiks again? She's going to walk away from Judaism. You're not asking a kasha from there. You know why? The $50 is because the rapist should lose the money. That's the concern. You're not concerned about maybe she's going to take the money and use it as a shiksa. The rapist shouldn't get away with it. That's why Abaye didn't ask in the case of knas. Rabbi didn't ask kasha Abaye. Why? Again, you know why? The reason for ksuba, what are you worried that she's going to take the $200 and then reject Judaism and use it later on? Yes, but the reason for the $200, as we learned the other day, according to most shitas, that's ksubas drabanan, is that he should think twice before divorcing her. So we want her to have the $200. She might use it as a shiksa. That's not our concern. Our concern is that he, when he marries her, should guarantee the $200 so that he should think twice before divorcing her. Okay,
she doesn't get the $200.
She gets the right to the $200. Correct. If he divorces her, if he dies, she gets the $200, or all the other stuff that he puts in there.
So that when we say that she turns 12, she 1 minute, and then she can't do it anymore. It has to be exactly then, whatever.
Right.
Of course.
No, but we mean, but saying like this, we're saying, so let's say you give it to her and she can't get rid of her. So we say we only give her the $200, but let's say he divorced her when she was 10 years old, and then she rejected Judaism, so she wouldn't get it, right? She doesn't have the right to it. Exactly. Right. Okay, I think we're saying the same. Okay. Yeah. All right, says the Mishnah. Agadol Shabbat Tana. Now, if a gadol, a regular adult male, slept with a girl under 3 years old, as disgusting as that sounds to us, Shabbat Tana. Tana here means not a girl under 12, under 3 years old. So as what did we say before? That doesn't take her out of the stage of being a psula because it grows back. As we're going to see, what do we really understand about? I don't understand the women's anatomy, but the psulim are not something that, we say they grow back, but it's not something like, here's a piece of paper, it's torn or it's not torn. There's a process to it. In other words, that they also diminish with age as a woman gets older. Maybe it depends on the physical aspects were different then than they are now in terms of how they mature. But as we'll see, that it doesn't mean necessarily, as a girl who's 30 years old, who's never had bia, may not have the same physical constitution as a girl who's 10 years old, because the psulim, as we see, as they get older, also diminish. Okay. We're not making that after me in terms of the dam, because the dam, we said, there are people who don't bleed, and there's proofs and things like that. So I go to Shabbat Tana. So what happens in a case like that? That she's still a psula, right? V'katan Shabbat Dola, or a boy who's under the age of 9. Remember, we learned once a boy is 9 years old, his bia is a bia. For Yibum, which is a doraisa, if his brother died and he's 10 years old and he had bia with her, he's consummated the marriage, even though he cannot be Mekadosh and Isha, right, on his own, because he's not bar mitzvah. But over here, the Torah, so to speak, was Mekadosh her for him. Okay, but let's say this katan was under 9 years old. Now his bia might be a bia, but you know what? It's not. Shabbat Dola doesn't make her. She's still entitled to 200 hours. Now we're not even getting it. We're not getting into the physical aspects. Has he destroyed her hymen? Has he made her a psula? She's not a. She's still considered a psula. In other words, his bia doesn't mean anything. Okay. Again, we're not looking at it. Well, is she a virgin or not? She's still considered a virgin. Just like a man who sleeps with a girl who's under 3 years old, she's still considered a virgin. If a young boy sleeps with a woman, also she's still considered a virgin. Okay. Umukas eitz. The third case here is mukas eitz. Mukas eitz means a woman who's lost her virginity not through physical contact with a male, but rather through an accident, a sporting accident or something. Something hit her. I mean, she lost her. I guess if she does enough horseback riding, that can also have that effect. She's like a mukas eitz. So mukas eitz, Rav Meir says, listen, she's still a psula, even though she may not have psulim, she may not bleed. She doesn't really have psulim there. She doesn't have a virginity, but she's still a virgin halachically because she hasn't had bia with a male and after the age of after she's been 3 years old. That's what Rav Meir says. Now Chacham disagree in the case of mukas eitz. Chacham say mukas eitz no, she's only entitled to 100 because she really is not a virgin anymore. She doesn't have psulim b'osamakam. Now the Rabbanan only argue in the third case, not the other two. Okay, we're going to come to that. We're going to discuss this in the Gemara. What about a girl who's a psula, even though she's been married? How does that happen? Psula almana grusha v'chalutza minana suin ksabasam mana. Now, a woman got married, and at the chuppah he dropped dead. Husband dropped dead. She's still a psula, or for whatever reason they didn't consummate the marriage. So she's right, or he divorced her right by makom. They had a fight right under the chuppah. They're reading the subbah. They had a fight. Or a chalutza, right? She got chalitza minan asuin, right? Ksubasa, meaning that she's entitled only to 100 hours because that's another chalitza minan asuin, meaning she got chalitza minan asuin, even though the brother, the deceased brother, was married to her, but she got chalitza. She's entitled only to 100 hours, even though she's still a psula.
You get chalitza after a marriage.
No, when the brother was married to her, the brother was married to her minan asuin. In other words, saying
that's always any chalutza,
right?
Minan asuin.
No, any chalutza, but she's still a psula. I'm talking about this case. In this case, she's still a psula. Whether she's an amana, grusha, chalutza, whatever the reason is, whatever reason she left the first marriage, she was still a virgin. They never consummated. You can have that automatically in Erison. Remember, by Yibum, if Reuben is only engaged to her, and he dies, is also Yibum. So, but here there was Nesuin, but she was still a psula. She's only entitled to 100 dollars, even though now it's going to be an issue. Why shouldn't she still a psula? She's a psula now. The assumption is no. If she was married, meaning he can't claim, like you asked before, he can't claim, I thought you were a psula because I was at the wedding. He dropped dead at the wedding. So I thought you was no. The assumption is that Ein Lan times psula, says the Mishnah, no claim. He can't say, in other words, we're going to talk about this later on. If she claims to be a psula, they wrote in the invitation, and she says she's a psula, right? And all these things, and she says, and they put that in the condition, I'm marrying you on the condition you're a psula, and then it turns out she be not a psula. So the whole thing is off. It's a mekachtos, right? So we're going to talk about what's a mekachtos, but that's clearly here he can't claim anything. Unless she said something, unless she says, I'm a psula. But in a stam case, if she was an almana or grusha chutza, even though she was a psula, he has no claim. Same thing. If any of these Yoris or Shrivshka, they became a full Jewess or they converted or whatever afterwards, or they got out of captivity after the age of 3 years old, right? After their third birthday, again, the same thing. You have to assume that you have to assume that they have been raped or that they no longer have their virginity. So there's no claim of psul in there, right? You can't claim I thought you were. No, if they were married or if they were in captivity or they were among the goyim and they only got out of that situation after the age of 3, you have to assume that they have no psulim. They're only entitled to 100, and he can't claim I thought you were 200 and the whole deal is off. No, they're entitled to the ksiva. Amar Rabbi Marab. Here we come to a very interesting question. Rav says that a katan, meaning the kid under 9 years old, who slept with the gdola, he did affect her virginity, so she's like a mukasates. She's like a mukasates. Now, what's halacha mukasates? And our Mishnah says it's machlokes. Rav Meir says she's like a psul gets 200. Chum say 100. Rav Yehuda says, when I said this in front of Shmuel, after Rav died, Rav Yehuda went to learn at Shmuel's yeshiva. He says, "Ein mukasates b'bas." There's no such thing. Mukasates is only if there's a sporting accident or a piece of wood hit her, but not b'basar. So if she's not considered a ba'ula, she's not considered a ba'ula according to Rav Meir, that doesn't affect her. She's still considered a psula, even though there is no hymen there, right? She's mukasates means she's not a virgin. If she had a examination, a doctor examined her, he would say she's not a psula. Yes, but if it was only by mukasates, she still has a lacha like a psula according to Rav Meir, not according to Rabbanan. Some say that it wasn't Rabbi Yehuda said in Rav and Shmuel, but it was a direct machlokes from Rav and Shmuel. Like machlokes Rav and Shmuel. Rav says, he's made her into mukasates. Shmuel says, no, that's not a mukasates. Mukasates is only literally mukasates. If it was this way, it doesn't do it. So what is the halacha of an under a 9-year-old boy who slept with a woman and affected physically her virginity? So that's the machlokes in our Mishnah. Is it Shmuel says basar, and apparently according to the Mishnah, she can be considered a psula because the beginning of the Mishnah said they all get 200, and the Rabban didn't argue that. So this is the going to be kasha on Rav. Masa Rav Oshia. So Rav Oshia going to kasha from our Mishnah that we just learned. Gadol shaval kana. What did the Mishnah say? The first 3 cases. Gadol shaval kana. If a gadol slept with a girl who's under 3 years old, she's certainly entitled to 200 because it grows back. That we all agree. But kana balad yoris and a boy under the age of 9 slept with a gadol and a mukasates to bas masayim. Rav Meir says they're all entitled to 200. They're all considered virgins, right? The girl under 3 years old, the katan balik dola, and a mukasates, even though in the last 2 cases, clearly physically there's her virginity is not there, still entitled to 200 Rav Meir. But chachamim amr mukasates basamana. I'm saying no, mukasates, she's still not a virgin. Maybe a 9-year-old who slept with him is not considered, that doesn't affect her virginity, even though he might have physically affected her virginity. But mukasates is only entitled to, and that's a chum shita. So what do you see over here? The chum don't argue in the second case. The chum don't say that karna balik dola also mukasates. They agree with the Rabbana, with Rav Meir, that karna balik dola is still entitled to 200. So that's a proof like Shmuel that ein mukasates b'basa. The chacham, what did Rav say? Rav said karna balik dola made her into mukasates. The chacham don't. From our Mishnah, see the chacham apparently agree with Rav Meir that karna balik dola she's still considered a psula, didn't make her into mukasates. Amar Rava says you can learn the Mishnah this way. Hachikam, this is how you have to learn the Mishnah according to Rav. Gadol abalik tana v'lo. That we understand that a gadol who slept with a girl under 3 years old doesn't affect her virginity. The pachas mikan under the age of 3 kenosin. That's like putting your finger in your eye, dummy. And I was like putting your finger in your eye, and teardrops come out. More drops keep growing afterwards. So the same thing, her virginity grows back. This is how he's going to learn the Mishnah. Also mukasates. That's how Rav will learn. Made her into mukasates. And mukasates gufas a machlokas put to the Rav Meir Rabbanan whether she gets 100 or 200. So that's how Rav will learn. So Rav says that a kanam al it's no worse than a piece of wood. You know, I mean, a kanam al he did affect her ba'osa makam. It's no worse than a piece of wood. That's Rav Shita. Shmuel says no. Mukasates is one halacha. Kanam al is not, even though it's physical, he's done something, but halachically she's still a psula. Amar Muhammad, machlokas kshehikar ba. Yeah.
I understand. How does that come up? No, she tainas.
We're not getting it. We're going to talk about the tainas now. That's exactly what we're going to get into now. The tainas. We're talking about in general. You're talking in general. The simple case is that they agree. You know that she had a riding accident or a sporting accident, and she said, and she has no psulim b'osamakom. And the rule is that she's like an almana entitled to $100 according to Chum. Rav Meir says no, she's halachically like a psula. Let's assume that that's the simple case. But what about when they don't know? That's exactly what they're going to talk about now. Machlokas between Rav Meir and the Chachamim is when he knew what was going on. Right? They had the sporting accident together. He took her to the hospital. When it happened, he knew what was going on. Rav Meir says, listen, she's no worse than a girl who's 29 years old now and has lost her virginity due to age. Bogeres means she just the body matures, and ba'osamakom, the psulim diminish. So she's no different than that. So therefore, she's also, even though a girl gets married for the first time at 29 or 59 or whatever, she's still a psula. She's never had bia. So that's what the mayor says. I don't care that her psulim are gone. She's still a psula. I said no. If she's like a ba'ula, she's like a woman who has had bia before, and she's only entitled to 100. But if you didn't know, if you didn't know means she fooled him. She fooled him. Everybody agrees at this point. We're saying that she's entitled to nothing. She's entitled to nothing because it's mekach tos. You fooled me. I thought you didn't say anything. I know you said you never slept with anybody before, but you didn't tell me that you had a riding accident. He's entitled to nothing. That's what we're saying at this point. Okay, that's what the Gemara says now. Rav Muhammad says, Rav Meir. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, just to understand Rav Meir and the Rabbanim, in the difference between by a Mukasei, Rav Meir, why does he compare it to a Bogris? Why don't you compare it to Bula? She doesn't know, physically she's missing her psulim there, so why don't you say she's like a Bula? Because Bula, Sabu Maisa, Bula had a Maisa, Bidei Adam, somebody slept with her. Hello, Sab Maisa. Here, nobody slept with her. She'd never been with a man before. So therefore, Rav Meir says she's really like a psula. Rabbanim, why do the Rabbanim compare it to Bula? Why do you compare it to Bula? Why isn't she like a Bogris who's lost her psulim due to maturity? Bogeris, she had no mice at all. Sab Maisa. And Bogeris, who's 29 or 59 or whatever, and never slept with anybody, but nothing. She never had any. There was no activity at all. But over here, there was a Maisa done to her. She had a riding accident or a ball hit her in there or whatever. She had some sort of an accident. Okay, so that's when we understand Rav Meir and Rabbanan. But you said here that the machlokas is where he knew what was going on. The question is she like a previously married, a previously owned Cadillac? Is she a previously married person or is she not? But if he didn't know about it, she's not entitled to anything. You fooled me, right? Mistake. She's not entitled to anything at all. Masav Rav Nachman, question you could say is, if it's mekach tos, does she even need to get? We're not getting into that issue, right? But as far as the money's concerned, mekach tos. Masav Rav Nachman, wait a minute. What happens? He slept with her and she says, wait a minute, there's no psulim here. She says, I was mukasei. I had an accident. I had a sporting accident. But he says, don't give me that. You slept with somebody before. They're having a fight. Now she's believed. Now, what do you mean she's believed? Here we're talking about lo hikrba, obviously, right? There's a fight about this. He didn't know in advance. It's a he says, she says situation, right? And she says, No, I had an accident. She's believed. She's believed sounds like she gets money, right? That's what we're saying, Yamanas. Elo Merav. So how can Rav Meir Shapiro say if he didn't know about it, she gets nothing? Elo Merav, no. Whether he knew about it or not, the Rav Meir Masai. Rav Meir holds she's a psula. So what? Either way, Rav Meir holds she's entitled to 200. There could be no difference. You can't say that Machlok Hikaba, Rav Meir Savavagras, and but a low Hikaba just doesn't make any difference. She's a psula. The Rabbanan Hikaba Mana Lo Hikaba Below Klum. The Rabbanan, Rav is learning this now in Ram Rachama. There wasn't in Hikaba and Lo Hikaba. Rabbanan, if he knew about it, she's like a previously married woman. She's entitled to 100. Lo Hikaba, if he didn't know about it at all, then he was fooled and she's not entitled to anything. Even though Rava said that, the Gemara now says, Rava retracted this opinion. As we'll see, she's still entitled to the 100, even if he didn't know about it, as we'll see. How? Tanya, what's the case about Shemra? Motzi Shemra, a man marries a woman, and he claims that she didn't have psulim, and he comes to court, right? And he claims that she was mazana, right? Bola bezin, Omer Ploni, and this guy says, Lo matzatzil b'tchum psulim, tells the father of the girl, she has no psulim. So it says over there, what? He has to pay, if it turns out that he's a liar, he has to pay $100, right? We're talking about a marriage, we're not talking about the rape, when he rapes a Nara psula, we're talking about he married her, right? So he claims she committed adultery. If there's Adam that she actually committed adultery, yesh luk subamana. The Brisa seems to read she's entitled only to 100. So Gemara says, what do you mean? Yesh sim says there's Adam that she committed adultery, meaning between the Arison and the Suin, she was adultery skila. She about skila. That's a Rusa gets skila. What are you talking about? She gets money. So the Bryce has to read this way. Let's say the Adam that she was Mazana before they ever got engaged, not when she was married. She said, yeah, he's not. He says no mitzvah psulim, right? I'm psulim. So if she was in Mikal, she has shiksulamana. In other words, basically he's saying that she's only entitled to 100. She was a bu'ula. She wasn't okay. So Samaris. That means to say, you assume that she was a psul and turned out to be ula. She's entitled to 100. That's what Rav Shesha says. You don't say it's a mekach tos and the whole marriage is off, right? She says no. She never had. Well, she is a bula now. But there's Adam that she committed adultery before. That wasn't adultery before they got engaged, right? So then she says she's only entitled to 100. If she says she never was, if she says she's still a psula, that was yesterday's Gemara, so you check her out. She says she's still a psula. If she's still a psula, so then he has no claim at all. But here he says, listen, you're not a virgin anymore, and when I married you, weren't a virgin. And if he has proof that she committed adultery after she engaged him, then she's killed. There's Adam and Asra. If the Adam say, yes, no, she committed adultery before, she's still entitled to 100. Rav Shesha says, you see over here that if you married her in a state where she was a psula, you assume that, and it turns out she's still entitled to 100. But Masar of Nachman, what do you mean? She's entitled, isn't it a mekach tos? Hanosi as the issue of lamas psulim. He married a woman, he didn't find psulim. He omer, she says, Mishir Stani Nasti, but he says, listen, you're right. You know what? But after we got engaged, I was raped. It's not my fault. After I was raped, after I was married, I was a psula when we got engaged, and I was raped. It's your bad luck, right? Your field was overflowed, was flooded. No, he says, no. You committed adultery before, not adultery. You slept with somebody before we were engaged, and you lied to me, right? You didn't tell me. And my mekah was a toast. The assumption of your mekah toast means less lakash is not entitled to anything. So what do you mean? Rav Shesha says over here. Oh, you see over here what? Where does the Brisa say? The Brisa says in the case of Motzi Shemra, if there's Adam that she committed adultery after they got married, they kill her, right? If she committed before, she's on 100. Rav Shesha says she's on 100, even though he thought she was a psul and it turned out she's not. Still entitled to 100. Here, apparently, you see when he claims, no, you committed adultery afterwards. She's not entitled to anything, meaning he didn't. It's a mekach tos, and she's not entitled to anything. In other words, we're talking about when she was raped. Was she raped after they were engaged or raped before? So she's not chayav misa. But he says, listen, if you were raped before, it's a mekach tos, mashma. But let's say klal is not part of the brisa. Mashma is nothing. Rav says, in this discussion, all the Rabbanim were there when Rav Sheshes says, you see from over here that if you married her in a state where she was, the assumption was she was and turned out to be a bula, she's still entitled to 100. All these rabbis were there for Kashilu, and they asked her, what do you mean it's mekach tos? V'shani my, and he answered, what did he answer? My mekach tos, not me Masayim, Avamana Isla. He said, yeah, it's a mekach tos, but she's still entitled to 100. Mekach tos, she's not a psula, but no worse than a bula. She says, I was raped afterwards, and he says, no, you had bia before, but she's entitled to 100. And you say you're not entitled to anything. Yes, Rabba. You're right. The one who asked the kasha asked the good kasha. Why? Because mekach tos legamri mashma. When it says over there, it's a mekach tos. It's mashma. If you knew that you were raped before we got married and you didn't say anything, that's a mekach tos. It's mashma. Mekach tos means the whole deal is off. Not that I owe you 100, but you shouldn't get anything. Velikasha. So if that's the case, how do you understand the case of Motzi Shemer? Motzi Shemer, the Bryce is over there. If she turned out that she committed adultery, she's killed, right? If not, she gets 100. Why should she get 100? If it turns out that she committed adultery or she had a bia before they got married, it's just a mekach tos. Tritz, you learn it this way. In the case of Motzi Shemer, the husband says to the father-in-law, "Hey, you gave me a girl. She was not a psula anymore." And if there's Adam that she committed adultery after the engagement, then Baskil, you kill her. Zinsa Mikar, if there's Adam, that she committed adultery or she had a relationship with somebody before they were married, Velo Klum, she's not entitled to anything. Yes, Mekach tos. Nimtzas Mukas Eitz. This is how he puts in the words now. Let's say it turns out the reason she's not a psula, is not because of any B at all, because Mukas Eitz, Yeshuk Subamana, she's entitled to 100. But the guy didn't know that she was a mukasei. It says nimtzas, right? He didn't know. He married her expecting a psula. So she wasn't a psula. He first claimed she must have committed adultery. No, she didn't commit adultery. She committed adultery or she slept with somebody before they were married. Oh, then it's mekach tos. Either way, he says, I want my money back. I don't want to marry this woman. I want her up mekach tos, either the get or maybe the whole thing is annulled if it's mekach tos. But he says, I'm certainly not giving her the 200 and not even the 100 if she had a relationship before, because it's a mekach tos. So what's the 100 that the Mishnah started talking about there? So if she was found to be a mukaseit, she's entitled to 100. But mukaseit is also l'chara mekach tos. He thought she was a psula, she's a mukaseit. But Rabbi said before, according to the rabbis, who said she's only entitled to 100, but if he didn't know about it, she gets nothing. You see, Rabbi retracted his opinion, and he said no. That certainly according to Rav Meir says she's like a psula, she's out the 200. But even according to Rabbanim, that a mukaseit gets 100. This answers your question at the end of the day, Irving. That even if she's a mukaseit, if he knew about it or not, it's not considered mekach tos. If she slept with somebody before, and turns out that's what they have. Hey, you slept with somebody before, you should have said something. Mekach tos, you get nothing. But if it turns out she was a mukaseit, that's like acceptable, and therefore she's entitled to the 200 to the $100 anyway. Right? Whether he knew about it or he didn't know about it. All right, we'll pick up from your Tanur Rabbanan tomorrow, Mitzvah. Som ka l'kulam.